Call to order this regular Board of Directors meeting for the Siloam Springs Board of Directors, May 17, 2022. Roll call.
Sappington,
Here.
Smiley,
Here.
Burns,
Here.
Hunt,
Here.
Rissler,
Here.
Allen,
Here.
Carroll.
Here.
At this time, if you all will please stand with me, and Director Sappington will lead us in a word of prayer, and if you will remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Our dear Heavenly Father, as we come before you tonight and make decisions that's going to concern our community, our friends, and our neighbors, I pray that you just lay on our heart the wisdom that we need to seek out your guidance in doing so. And I thank you for all the wonderful amenities and all the pleasures that we're allowed to enjoy as citizens of this city. And I pray for each one of the other board members tonight that they feel your presence and that they are lifted up to you in making decisions. I pray for our community, and I pray for all of our crucial workers and city employees that you keep them safe and from harm. And it's with all of this that I thank you each day for creating me and letting me love you. And I just pray that in your holy name. Amen.
Thank you. At this time, I would ask that anyone that has any type of electronic device, please silence that. Thank you very much. Next is public input time. The public may address the Board of Directors on any item that is not listed on the board's regular agenda. Is there anyone that would like to address the board? If not, the public may address the Board of Directors on any item that is on our consent agenda. Is there anyone here that would like to do that? If there is not, we will move on to our consent agenda. Item A, regular meeting minutes, May 3rd, 2022. Item B, dedication of utility easements and right-of-way, 2700 and 2750 East Kenwood Street. C, dedication of utility easements, 1995 Highway 412 East. D, budget amendment, Parks and Recreation, Ventrac Mower, $43,000. Item E, budget amendment, Police Department, salaries and wages, overtime, $47,100. F, Resolution 28-22, grant application, ArDOT Transportation Alternative Program, Progress Avenue Sidepath. G, Resolution 2922, grant application, ArDOT Transportation Alternative Program, West Harvard Street, Sidepath. H, Resolution 30-22, grant application, ArDOT Recreational Trails Program, Dogwood Springs Trail Rehabilitation. I, Resolution 31-22, setting hearing date for right-of-way vacation, 900 block of East Tahlequah Street. J, landowner agreement, community development, Illinois River Watershed Partnership, Sager Creek Stream Bank Restoration, $158,000.
Take a breath now.
And I can take a breath now.
Long consent.
So, directors, is there any item on the consent agenda that you would like to have pulled for discussion?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I'd like to pull D, F, and G. I have questions about.
Okay. E, F, and G.
Excuse me, D or E?
I'm sorry.
D.
D, D, F, and G. Thank you. Anyone else? If not, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented with items D, F, and G removed?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Smiley,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes.
Hunt,
Yes.
Rissler,
Yes.
Allen,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Sappington.
Yes.
Motion is approved. So Director Allen, we
Yes.
will start with item D, the budget amendment.
Yeah, I've got a question, if Don would come up. I thought we had already budgeted a mower in this budget. Did we budget one or more already in this 2022 budget?
Yes, sir. So there were two mowers. One was for parks, and then one was also for the airport, two of the same mowers.
And this is a third mower.
This would be the third mower that would be put two into Parks and Recreation. Yes, sir.
Why would we suddenly think we needed another mower?
Okay. So when we received the other two mower, quite frankly, after budgeting and looking at the areas that we needed to use these mowers in that met the requirement to where we would no longer use the zero-turn mowers, it was decided that it would be more efficient if we had a second one to have two separate crews versus moving one machine from location to location. So we're looking to try to be more efficient. And so the budget amendment was for a truck that we had budgeted that we weren't able to source because the bids were not awarded.
The two that were budgeted, one for the airport, one for the parks,
Yes, sir.
were they both replacing old mowers?
No, sir. So these are the mowers that will handle slopes at a safer,
Right.
have the stability control and the articulating decks, whereas
Still have other mowers besides the two new ones that are budgeted. We have other mowers, right?
yes, we have other mowers. Over time, our goal would probably be to phase out the zero turns that are more of your flat surface mowers and utilize these.
I could tell you, I have a real problem and have had a problem for many years of utilizing money budgeted for something and then deciding to move it to something else simply because we can't spend it on what we had budgeted. This is why we don't have budgets anymore that come in under budget or money saved at the end of the year, because we're always finding something else to spend money on if we can't spend it how we budgeted. If we already had mowers and already budgeted two, I don't see why we need to suddenly be buying a third one, most especially for $43,000. So I can't support this.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
when the airport mower's not in use, because it obviously is not in use every day, can it not be used for Parks and Rec instead of spending more money?
Yeah, and we're currently doing that today. Even with that, we think it would be efficient for the third mower because of the terrains in certain areas. So we split it up into three different groups or zones. And so even with that one being over there, we can still utilize it like at the gateway, so to speak. But then the other areas like Memorial Park, we actually have to sterilize the deck because of the type of grass we have there that we're not trying to spread broadleaf. And then there are along the banks here at Bob Henry. So because of the turnaround time of us mowing, we thought it would be efficient to have the third one to help utilize that and to be safer and more efficient. I mean, is the ultimate goal with the mowers.
Madam Mayor,
Yes. Marla.
will you be hiring additional staff?
No, ma'am.
Anyone else?
And let me clarify, additional staff that's already budgeted, no, we won't be adding. We're just going to fill the positions we have open.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Mindy?
do you have part-time staff just for this time of year?
We do
Some-
not.
Okay.
We don't have seasonal staff, no, ma'am.
Okay. I was just curious. Has it been difficult to keep up with all of the mowing here recently because of all the rain? It seems to grow as you're watching it.
We found that it's been very challenging, and
So
that was also put into the
So
process
another
of,
mower could help tackle.
yeah,
that.
split the crews and try to, again, be more efficient is what the goal was. And have the mowers that would operate on the slopes that we have in a safer manner.
Philip?
Don, correct me if I'm wrong, but as we started talking about the 2023 budget, and as we talked about this last year, we were thinking of requesting for a Ventrac mower in the 2023 budget, correct?
Yes, sir.
So when the idea that the truck didn't get bid through the state bids, didn't get a bid, what the thought process for staff was we could ask for that money to be used for the Ventrac mower this year, and then in lieu of asking for another Ventrac mower next year, try to go back and get the vehicle that we couldn't get this year. That was the thought process, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Madam Mayor, Don, do you know how much are the two mowers that we have budgeted? Just around about ballpark.
The ones we already bought and received this year?
Have you already?
Yes, sir.
They were for this year's budget.
Yes, sir.
The airport and the parks.
Yes, sir.
How much were they?
So the one mower, I believe, and Philip may have reported this at the last meeting, I'm just off the top of my head, I think it was around 47. That's because we bought two different attachments for it. One specifically for the soccer complex, one is a contour mower that would allow for us to mow that at a tighter cut without scalping. And then the other mower, I believe, at the one that was for the airport was around 42,000 with a 6-foot deck.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Lisa.
Philip, just so people understand, because not all the citizens understand how budgets work and everything. If we did not spend this $43,000 at the end of the year, what happens to that money?
Would go back into reserves, and it would end up possibly in the, in the future budget, but it would just go back into reserves.
So it could be used for streets, it could be used for drainage, it could be used for all these other issues that are coming about.
It would go back into the general fund, and if the general fund had any monies transferring to the street department, yes, it could do that, yes. But it would go to the general fund.
Okay. So it's hard for me to say, okay, this year we'll do 43,000, and we don't even know if we would approve it next year. We're wanting to raise rates. We have drainage issues after this last flooding. That is a major issue we need to be focusing on. And we have streets that you can't drive down without tearing your car up. I think that this lawnmower, there's days that it might sit. And it's hard for me to say, yeah, I would agree spending $43,000 of the citizens' money.
Anyone else?
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
My problem that I referenced earlier is that we used to not operate this way years ago, decades ago. We've become very similar to the federal government, that you certainly don't want to not spend all the money you have budgeted, because then you might not get the same amount next year, which is the way the federal government operates. If we didn't need something, or if something came about like this truck not being able to be purchased, in years past, it just didn't get purchased. We didn't go find something to replace that money. Even if it was something we were looking to buy next year, we didn't say, well, let's go ahead and spend this money and move it from here to here. I've seen it moved all over the place in the last year for different things, just because there's savings. Well, we saved $10,000 by buying this, so now we get to go buy this. Why don't we ever try to say, let's buy what we have budgeted and let's stick to that? And if there's money left over at the end of the year, then so be it. I get frustrated seeing the movement of let's go find something else, even though it's not in the works this year. Let's go find it, and so we can spend this money. I don't think it sits well with our constituents. Thank you.
David, anyone else?
Mayor,
Yes, Brad.
Philip, since you've been here as city administrator, do we have a balanced budget, and do we put money in the reserves every year?
Yes.
Yes, Carol.
I think we work on a very tight budget. I think staff brings us a very good budget. There's a lot of other things that they have a wish list that gets eliminated. I don't think we ever have anything on our budget that is unnecessary. If this is a necessary item and it makes us more efficient, I think that we should go ahead and do that. and buy that mower. With this mower, you don't have to go back and pick one up and bring it somewhere else. Is that what I'm also hearing? You're not transferring these mowers around.
Right, it'll allow the mower to work in that area. And the thing I probably should have added earlier is that these mowers, because of the articulating decks, they don't sink into the ground. So these were also the mowers we were looking at when we were trying to debate whether or not we use remote mowers, and we decided to go with these because we can mow in wet surfaces, or or zero-turn mowers. If it's slick, then they slide and gets unsafe. And so because of the weight distribution and the well balance, this is the reason why we are interested in these mowers, because we can utilize them more often.
So it's also a safety factor.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else? If not, do I have a motion to approve item D, budget amendment, Parks and Recreation?
So moved?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Burns,
Yes.
Hunt,
Yes.
Chrysler,
No.
Allen,
No.
Carroll,
Yes.
Sappington,
No.
Smiley.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Director Allen, item F, Resolution 28-22.
Yes, ma'am. I have a question. Why are we building this one and the next one, G, 10-foot side paths? The rest of Progress is not 10 foot. I drive Progress every day, and it's very rare that you see more than one or two people on the sidewalk, certainly not meeting anyone else. I can't imagine living on Harvard and losing 5 feet of my yard because we want to have a 10-foot sidewalk. There's 3 foot, 4 foot, 5 foot, 6 foot sidewalks all over town. I don't know why those aren't good enough. Can somebody explain to me 10 foot?
Yes, Justin Bland, city engineer. So what we're doing on that is we're following it was basically a previous plan that was adopted by the board, I believe in 2015 or 14 possibly. Yeah, that came by, and it basically was the drawing a blank on the exact name of it, but it basically laid out all the side paths and bicycle connectivity across the city. So when we have a project on one of those routes, we just check that plan that was previously adopted, and if it's a side path, then we do that. If there are newer on Progress, since there is sidewalks on both sides, with new ones we do the 10-foot section, and then as stuff happens over the years, we would make the connection and widen it out so that it would be 10 foot the whole way. But in short, it's just we're following that previous plan that was adopted by the board.
Just because it was adopted in 2015, do you think it's right? 10-foot sidewalks are going to be the same thing that you guys just put down Hyco Street, which makes it very, very difficult to drive Hyco. You took up their yard. You really made an obnoxious-looking sidewalk that I don't quite understand, because you're not expecting people to ride their bikes on the side path. Okay, am I wrong? Bikes don't go on these side paths. They like to drive the street.
Okay.
You ask any bicyclist, they want to drive the street. They do not like driving on a sidewalk, riding on a sidewalk. Ask any of them. Now, that may be your goal with the side path, 10-foot side path, but you're not meeting, when you meet up where the rest of it is, anything even close to 10 foot, anything close to it. It makes no sense to put 10-foot sidewalks. And trust me, I get it. Harvard has needed something a long time ago, and instead of doing sharrows and horse troughs in the middle of the street years ago, we should have put a sidewalk. But 6 foot seems big enough. And I cannot imagine, that's 4 foot taller than me. I cannot imagine anything needing that many feet for people to meet, or even if bikes did use. Harvard has traffic. You're going to limit the car traffic because of what you're going to be putting in, the same way you've done on Hyco. And I'll just tell the board, if you haven't driven down Hyco from Sherry Whitlock to Simmons headquarters, you really need to go look at it. It really is too big, and I don't understand why 6 foot isn't satisfactory. Just because something was approved based on connectivity studies in 2015 does not mean it is something that needs to be done now. In addition, the one you're talking about on Harvard is how much money? $850,000. The one on Hyco that we just spent last year, Justin, that was a lot higher than what we estimated, wasn't it? We thought we were going to get a lot more money. It ended up costing over $700,000, right?
I don't have those numbers ready, but that sounds the ballpark, yes.
For a very short section of sidewalk, $700,000. We didn't get what we thought we would get from the government. I just don't understand how we can justify spending $850,000 on a 10-foot sidewalk down Harvard Street. I believe if you asked every resident up and down that street, they would say, please, please build us a sidewalk. But I don't think anybody wants to give yard up, much less street up, when it's not a wide enough street as it is for a 10-foot sidewalk.
Madam Mayor.
I'm really not done.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, David.
So I don't understand why, just because something was looked at and approved years ago, that we can't look at it again and say, is 6 foot not enough? Because it seems like, I understand the Dogwood Trail. That's not taking up somebody's yard. That's going around the baseball field, and that's used a lot. I get it. But down Harvard Street and even on Progress, you're not going to be matching anything. It's 5 foot right now on Progress. So I can't support either one of those, and I don't understand why anybody would. Especially when we don't know if we will get the matching grant. On Harvard, we already missed it in 2019. We didn't get what we asked for. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Mindy?
Justin, do you know what the requirement is for bikes and pedestrian sharing? Is it 8 feet, 10 feet?
10 feet is the minimum.
10 feet is the minimum, okay. As a cyclist, I am one that does appreciate having the side paths, and it seems to work pretty well to share with pedestrians. So,
Mayor?
Yes.
one likes it.
I'm sorry, Mindy, are you
Are you
through?
done?
I'm done.
Okay. Lisa?
So in 2015, when we approved that, which I wasn't on the board at the time, what was the idea behind the tent? Was it just for cyclists, or is there other reasons?
So I actually wasn't here when that was approved either, but my understanding is that, with the sidewalks, you're going to get the pedestrians and the cyclists off the street. Typically, there are advantages to having 10 foot. Basically, you kind of get 10 foot just on one side as opposed to maybe a 5 foot sidewalk on both sides, which is what we commonly see. So we're kind of putting it all on one side. It's a two-way pathway where you can have pedestrians and cyclists going two ways on one side of the street. And I think the idea was just to kind of delineate these routes across the town where we would eventually connect all this together, and there would be that kind of connectivity for cyclists to be off the street, with the pedestrians, I think was the intent.
So you said on that street over by Walmart, there's sidewalks on both sides. And you're wanting 10 foot on both sides?
No, it would just be on one side. On that one in particular, I think the interest was like with the high school. We see a lot of people walking down from the high school over to Progress and down, and that's the west side tends to be the side that has all the traffic basically there.
So the idea of splitting it, does that not require children to cross over traffic a lot? I mean, if you're putting the sidewalk on one side only?
It can. We have to be pretty, we have to kind of be strategic about that. We've done this elsewhere, like up there on Arvest property across from, or on Holly Street. You kind of have to think it through and make the connections. On Harvard, the connection there is actually, because once you get to Carl Street, it's kind of an extension of the Dogwood Springs Trail through there. So that's an area that we're gonna have to make sure that we get that connectivity to the trail system there. So it can be, but we'd have to kind of be strategic about it.
I'd like to see sidewalks on both sides for the safety of the kids. And
Well, there is a sidewalk already on the east side in front of Walmart. On the opposite side is where they're talking about putting this, where it needs it. It needs it on the opposite side.
Right, but he was talking about if they do extend that down, it's not gonna be 10 foot all the way down, right?
Not with this project. We would just do the gap right now, and then possibly in the future, as projects happen across the frontage, we would, if development were to occur up there, right now there's the pharmacy project that was just built north of there. Because it's on the plan that was adopted, if the development were to happen there, we would require them to do the 10-foot section. So the idea is eventually, over time, it's all going to connect through as 10-foot would be.
I just thought she was confused that there was not a sidewalk on the east side. There is a sidewalk on the east side. It's just not very big.
Across from Walmart, or just across the Walmart property, that's correct.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's on the
Mayor?
east side
Yes,
of Progress.
I'm sorry.
Um,
Lisa, are you through, or
No.
do you have more? Okay.
So I'm not a cyclist, but my husband is a cyclist, and he cycled in marathons and DC and in a lot of Nashville. So he's cycled in big cities, and he doesn't like our side paths. He doesn't think that they're not as safe as when he cycled in DC. They're not as safe when he cycled, and that's not putting down not you or the side paths or anything. He doesn't feel as safe because he can follow the road the way the road is supposed to work a lot easier than he can the side path and have to worry about if there's children on those side paths. And that scares him when you're going at a speed that children's safety is very important. And so that's from his perspective, and I wanted to share it.
I think that what we've seen is that you have different levels of cyclists, like how comfortable they are and where they want to be. And I think some of your more experienced cyclists would stay in the street. I think the side path's a good alternative for families and smaller children because it does give more of a buffer from the traffic, and it basically gives options. But I think the people that are going to be out there on road bikes just really moving, they're probably just going to stay in the street. I think that is probably accurate.
Yeah.
I think, Carol, did you? Okay. So,
The one thing about this sidewalk, it goes to Mount Olive and its connection over to Southside, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I know several people that bike extensively every day, not only ride, but gravel and different things. They do not want to ride in the street. They want off of the street. And I think that was one of our goals, was to be a bicycle community, but not in the street where they're fighting traffic. I would imagine that there are children that are walking or maybe biking on this sidewalk over to Southside. I don't know that for a fact. I don't have school-aged children that go there, but I can see that happening. So I believe in that 10-foot side path. I think it's a workable solution. And I know that we were talking about that when we were doing those experimental things that nobody liked. And and at that point, we said we are going to do a sidewalk on Harvard. And this is what we have. And I do believe that it works, and I would be in favor of it. Thank you.
thank you, Carol. Marla?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree for the safety and the connectivity. My concern is we are going from one size to another to another. The inconsistency looks bad. It's also unsafe. I see on Harvard where we could do it the same width all the way down. Could we not, because of the cost of cement right now and how hard it is to get, that we go down to an 8-foot? It'll still be large enough to keep both modes of transportation. And then look seriously at Progress Avenue, because we don't want to have one size, then a larger one, then another one, and have to build the gradient between the two.
So as far as the width goes, I think as a side path, it's expected to be 10 foot. I know, so I'm going to be coming back next week with another round of these TAP grants. You know, there's the Regional Planning Commission grants, and then the state ones. The state ones are tonight. I know the regional planning, if it's a side path, they basically require it to be a 10-foot width. Now, if we were just to go down a sidewalk and just take it all the way down to 5 foot, that would be the other option. But I think that if they want to promote these wider side paths just for the sake of having multi-directional traffic for both cyclists, so that may be an issue trying to go down to 8 feet there because of that.
Well, as I visually go down Harvard, there are several older homes that I don't know if a 10-foot side path would be feasible. And since we have to continue the length of the street, I'd like some more information on the property owners and how they feel about giving that part of their lawn, their lawn.
So we did actually begin the process, not of contacting the people, but back in I guess it would have been 2020 when this was in the budget, started the design work. And we don't think that we're going to have to get any right-of-way acquisition through there. There's like a 60-foot right-of-way through there off the top of my head. I think what we had settled on, it was going to be built up on the north side of the road, and we were just going to build a curb right on the existing edge of the road, and then it would just be 10 foot adjacent to that. So we don't think it's actually going to encroach much more than that existing ditch line that's already there. It would be similar to what we've done in Hyco. We're not actually acquiring property. We're trying to work within that existing corridor is what the plan would be.
Yes.
Did I hear you, you don't think you have to go in and get easements? Because of the easements the city has?
That's correct. When that was platted, there was a wide right-of-way there. That's correct.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, David.
I want to stress again that I believe we need all of these, most certainly Progress and West Harvard. I drove both of them today. As I drove Harvard, there were 4 people walking in the street carrying groceries. There's no sidewalk on either side of that street, and it is desperately needed. And Progress as well, because just because there's a sidewalk on the east side, people should not have to cross that dangerous Progress to get over from one side to the other because there's only one sidewalk. So I firmly believe we need the sidewalk on the other side. It's as Marla said, I just don't understand why we have to have 10 foot. I don't want children riding their bike, but I can tell you I'm the only one in this room that was on the board in 1995 when we put the first bike lane in Siloam Springs, which was down Dogwood Street. We went over it, long, tedious decision, and that was based upon people saying they don't want to ride on the sidewalk. They don't like to ride their bikes on the sidewalk. So we built a bike lane. The people I see using the sidewalk are the kids, and that is most certainly a need to have a wide enough side path, if that's what you want to call it. I still don't understand 10 foot unless that's the only way to get the grant money. If that is the only requisition or requirement, I would say if we don't get it, are we allowed to look at a smaller 8 foot if we do not get the grant?
If we fund it ourselves, yeah, we can do whatever width we like, absolutely.
I fully get now why you're saying 10 foot in order to get the grant. But I am very concerned with the homeowners up and down Harvard dealing with, and I will say, the only people I see using our side paths on bikes are parents with children. People who bike to work, people who bike as regular transportation, always are in the street. They prefer it. I've talked to them. That's what they want. So we did the bike lane back in 1995, thinking it was going to be the start of all over the city, and it did not happen. But I still don't agree 10 foot is necessary to accommodate bicyclists and walkers. If that is the requirement, as you say, Justin, I understand. And that's what you just said, correct? To get the federal funding?
For a side path, that is correct, yes.
Yes, Philip.
That was the other thing. Part of our paperwork said federal funding, part of it said state funding.
It's federal funding that's distributed through the state. It's just the same.
That's what I wanted to make sure. I just thought that, but I wanted to make sure because of what it said.
Justin, as it relates to the question that Director Allen just asked, there's two different TAP grants available. One is through ArDOT, and one is through Northwest Arkansas Regional Planning. Is it accurate to say that with ArDOT, the likelihood we could submit for a TAP grant through ArDOT for a 5 or 6 foot sidewalk? But the likelihood of receiving that funding is less likely because ArDOT is looking for those alternate transportation opportunities, which is Transportation Alternative Program. So they're looking for that opportunity to have pedestrians and bicyclists on that walkway, i.e. side path. Is it the same with Northwest Arkansas Regional Planning, or is it possible that if the board chose to reduce the width, that we could still apply for it, but just not call it a side path, I think, correct? But likely at ArDOT not get the money. At Northwest Arkansas Regional Planning, is it the same? Are they looking for those in their TAP grants because it's alternative transportation? Are they looking for both generally, or could we apply for just a 5 or 6 foot sidewalk?
I think there are a couple of things to consider there. I think one thing they are looking for alternative transportation. They're also looking for us. I mean, when I bring up the plan that was previously adopted, I think they're looking for us to be proposing projects from adopted plans. So that was kind of the reasoning behind sticking with the side path width that was proposed, because it was on that previous plan. That being said, I mean, I think if it was the board's pleasure to reduce it to just a sidewalk, I think that's a possibility. I know we have the the Washington Street sidewalk project currently. The only inconsistency would be that it wouldn't match up with our master plan. So that would be the kind of the wrinkle in that application. But if on progress it was the board's pleasure to go down to 5 foot to match what's there, we could definitely propose that and try and see what happens.
And the same for the Harvard Street. We could make a case if that's the board's wishes to maybe, and I'm just going to shoot in the middle and say 8 feet due to limited right-of-way or due to some engineering constraint, and we could propose it to see if that would fly, correct?
Yeah, we can. I just will say that the feedback I've gotten is that there's concern about not building. I'm just wanted to be upfront about it. If it doesn't meet the standard, that they don't think it's going to be adopted or people will use it as much because it's too narrow. So that'd be the concern.
Not going to get the points if it doesn't meet the standard. But I wanted to put it out there. They're very supportive, generally speaking, of side paths because it meets that standard, that engineering standard for bicyclists and pedestrians, right? As you said earlier, 5 feet dual transportation routes. And we're doing that because we're going after the federal dollars, the grant money. We could do less. We take a greater chance of not getting the grant. And then if we decide to do the path at all, it's all city money. So it's a struggle. 10 foot is a fairly wide thing. And in certain areas like the Dogwood Springs Trail, it makes perfectly good sense. It becomes a little bit more difficult when you're looking at Harvard. You're looking at Progress where there's 5 foot sidewalks and you want to go 10, but we match up at a later date. It's the same way with sidewalks in general when we're trying to find, builders having to build sidewalks, and we build them, section at a time, and there are gaps. So it's the board's pleasure. We'll do, Director Allen, if you decide to make a motion to go to 6 foot or 8 foot instead of 10 foot, and the board approves that, we'll submit that and we'll go from there.
Well, I think the question really comes down to if we get the grant. And if it's a requirement to have 10 foot. And I'll tell you, I don't have a problem with 10 foot on Progress. I have a problem where 10 foot doesn't match up to what's the rest of the way down Progress. We desperately need it on the west side where there is no sidewalk. It's far too dangerous for pedestrians to cross Progress just to go from, say, Signature Plaza to Walmart. It's horrible. And if you can get that way by getting away from that horrible intersection where there's wrecks all the time, we need a sidewalk there. I just don't want it unless, as Justin was saying, when this, what is it, a pharmacy or something goes in, you can then force that to be narrowed to where it actually comes to where it's not just like 10 foot and then suddenly matches 5 foot. That, as Marla was saying, it just doesn't make us look good. We desperately need it on the west side of Progress. My biggest concern is Harvard and the older homes, the residents not wanting to give up their yards. And so I just think 10 foot is way too big on Harvard, and I don't see why 6 or 8 foot would not be just as well. Because even if you have some walkers meeting a mother and her kid bikers, they're gonna step off and let the bikers pass. I mean, it's a small town. Everybody has to get along, right?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
just a point of clarification here. My understanding has always been, I like to ride my bike. I can't call myself a cyclist. But my understanding has always been that unless it's a 10-foot side path, I'm not supposed to be on my bike on a sidewalk. And so when we see those kids even on sidewalks, technically, no one's going to tell them to get off the sidewalk, but they're really not supposed to be on the sidewalk riding a bike. That is for pedestrians. Am I correct in my understanding? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Madam Mayor.
Yes.
So just for clarification, so citizens understand, because a lot of times we sit up here and we talk back and forth and citizens don't exactly know what's going on. Philip, can you explain, we're just voting on applying for this. If we don't get it, we can still come back and say, okay, let's discuss. Do we have 5 foot, 6 foot, 8 foot?
Yes, ma'am, you're exactly correct. So what you're voting on is for us to apply for these grants, we have to have a resolution approved by the board. If we get the grant, you have to accept it, correct, Justin? There has to be a formal acceptance of it. So you could deny the acceptance at that time if you wished. If we don't get the grant, you could decide that you wish to fund it and only do a 5-foot sidewalk at Progress, if that's what you decided to do in the next year's budget, or direct us to do that and put it in the budget. The same on Harvard. Instead of a 10-foot, you could say, we don't get the funding, we'll fund and do it out of our reserves and do a 5-foot sidewalk on Harvard. But the belief, and I don't have the numbers in front of me. I'm sorry, I should have totaled them all up. But you're talking a fairly large amount of money, and out of that, 20% of that, if we got all 3 grants, only 20% of that is what we would have to spend, which would be less than if we did 5-foot sidewalks all on ourselves, right, by ourselves. I mean, we'd spend a lot more money than what we would on the 20% match.
So is there a way on the Harvard, because I am concerned about that. I do care about the citizens, and they do come to me and they do call me, and I hate the idea of taking and upsetting citizens that have lived in this community for a very long time. Can we delay applying for the Harvard, or do we have to decide tonight?
I suspect if you want to apply, and Justin could confirm this, but if you want to apply for the ArDOT TAP grant, there's a deadline, and I assume that deadline is approaching, and that's why we're here today. You could direct staff to apply for it, and if we get it, if we're awarded it, or between now and the time that if we're awarded it, to have a neighborhood meeting with those residents on Harvard and get some feedback from them and see what their interest is or not, and then you could use that as a determining factor of whether or not we accept the grant if we receive it. Justin, do you know the deadline?
It's June 1st, so this would be the last meeting to actually get that resolution on there for them.
When you mentioned earlier going about TAP grants from Northwest Arkansas Regional Planning, pardon me, are we, because I know sometimes we apply the same project to both, trying to hedge our bet, right? Are we planning to do the same?
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
So The argument being is that we want to apply with ArDOT. We want to apply for the same project with Northwest Arkansas Regional Planning to, double our chances of getting a grant, because they won't, both grants we won't get. They won't fund both, both grant providers won't fund the same project, right? Or will they?
Sometimes they do, actually, yeah. We had that on the Hico Trail. They both pitched in some money, so
Okay.
that is a possibility. And I will say, typically we only apply for one of these grants each year. The reason we're doing two this year is just because we heard that ArDOT is receiving, I think it was 30 or 40% extra federal funding. So we just thought, with this being it was a parking lot board goal from last year to try to get federal funds for this project at Harvard Street. So we just thought we'd throw it in there. So that's the reason we're applying for two. I don't think I mentioned that in the memo, but normally we would just do one. But the priority is going to be the one on progress. The Harvard would be the second priority as far as funding goes.
Okay, and as a director, I'd like to say, if we do approve it, I do want to make sure we set up a meeting with those people and that were involved in that, so we know and we can hear what they have to say.
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Mayor. You hit the nail on the head there, Philip. If we get it, we go and ask the residents, just, are you going to be opposed to a 10-foot or and if we get it and we explain this is the requirement, then maybe they'll be okay with it. I just don't want us to hack them off if we don't have to. That's what worries me, is that is a huge sidewalk. Do we have the question, Justin, on that street? You said that this is part of the master plan. Did we already have one side of the street or the other designated where this side path would go on Harvard? I guess I'm thinking like it'd be the north side or the south side?
I think the north side, it makes the most sense. Once you get down to Mount Olive, there's the active warning beacon across Mount Olive's on the north side, and then on the west end, the Dogwood Springs Trail comes in from the north side. So I think that makes the most sense. And it seems like from the preliminary work we did, that was the more constructible side as well.
Just some people's yards, they have a fence that goes almost up to the street, and it's just, I don't know, it just seems really odd. But Philip, I appreciate you bringing options up that we can look at as we learn more on if we get it or not. So I did want to remind, though, we said we tried in 2019, didn't we? And we didn't get it on Harvard. So, right. But I did read where there's more federal funds, so it's a good idea to go ahead and do it.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Carol.
when we apply for this grant and we get this grant, it can only be done the way we specified we were going to do. We can't change it once the grant is given to us.
I've never been asked that question before. There is an allowance for scalability. So, for instance, if the city couldn't come up with their proportionate amount, you can reduce the length and whatnot of it. But like I said, typically the standard for side path is 10 foot. So I would expect that they would be looking for that in this situation.
What I'm saying, if we present this grant and we're saying it's a 10-foot and we get the grant, we can't come back and do an 8-foot.
I believe that's correct, yes.
And first of all, we have to pass a resolution that we approve applying for this grant. And then we go from there.
Yes.
Correct? Okay.
Yes.
Then Philip, you said if we do get the grant, do we have to vote to accept the grant?
I believe you have to vote to accept the grant. You're voting, again, we have to have a resolution to apply, which is, and then to get the grant, your acceptance of the grant is to say you're gonna spend your match. You've got the match, you're gonna spend it. We would come back, chances are it may be a budget amendment, to say it's $100,000, they're giving us 80 grand, we're gonna.
It's not like we're gonna say, no, we don't want your money.
Well, you might at that point, because, you might say after we have the neighborhood meeting, they might all say no, or something else has come up and we don't have our match, right? So we may find that by that time there's been more engineering done and we find something that's unbeknown today and the cost goes up dramatically and we have to put more money to it, right? But you have to approve the application, and then you have to approve the acceptance. And today is just applying for it.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Mayor, I have a question. When we apply for this grant, do we have to vote to accept the grant?
Yes.
Thank you, Philip. Yes, Brad.
Well, I'll chime in because I do have a little history. I was on the board. To David, in '95, the scuttlebutt in town was that we put a bike lane, which is different than a side path, because Mark Latham's house was there. And people were complaining. Now, for a guy that rides his bike, and I use that lane, and then I'd hit Villa View, and then we'd hit dirt roads before it became a hip thing, because it's just what we did. And then we fast forward to present when I got a lot of emails and texts because at board meetings I use connectivity and walkability too much, excessively. And I will admit I did use it excessively because I'm a massive, massive fan of it. It's a part of quality life, the three-legged stool, and you can go on. But when Sidepath came along and I raised my hand, and Marla loved the armadillos and all the experimental things that we took away. The only thing we really kept out of that were the sharrows, which was the markings for people that ride in the road, and those are all faded. Those are gone. And those are designed in the road to give the biker that uses the road and the person driving the car to be aware that there's also going to be cyclists on the road. Some casual riders also, Mindy, you're not left out. But when we took away those elements, and Bob Coleman didn't like them, as an example, Jimmy Harris lives on the corner. He didn't like them. And then we looked at this. We had public come up. We had school children, families. They liked this East Harvard. The concept there is connecting to where it shows on the Dogwood Trail. And I believe the concept in the master plan is the only cross on heavy traffic is Mount Olive, and then we would continue on, and then we'd make a left somewhere and it'd take it downtown and connect in. So in the bigger plan, that's part of it, connectivity for kids and that sort of thing. In a historical neighborhood, when they chose in the master plan, they put a side path that became controversial that runs in front of my house on Tahlequah Street, and also runs through part of the old cemetery, and then it deadpans in to a traditional narrow sidewalk. It's different when it happens in your front door, when you're for side paths and connectivity, and then it's happening, your drainage changes. There's some things that I had to request from the city. There's some things that I had to do. Because it elevated and it wasn't there before. And so as a homeowner, I had to request some things, and I know the public reached out, but I could tell you that is a heavily used little connection piece. And I didn't think it'd be used to the extent that it is being used right now. And it's just really, it's nice to see. My dog has learned to bark. And stuff like that, but and people stop by the house and they ask questions and they talk to you, and you just want to be at home in the yard, but people are out and about. So I'm a big fan of these, and the width wise, why I think it's so important is that if I'm a cyclist and traffic is going both ways, a courtesy is, as a casual rider, you would say on your left, and that lets the folks know that are walking along that you're going to be passing on their left-hand side. Nobody has to stop or step off anywhere. It's one of our weaknesses in Siloam is trail etiquette. You don't see that in other places where there's a lot of heavy trail use. And I understand the struggle of adopting a master plan, and that not many members of this board were on. And in 23, and as you go out in the future, there may be a point where nobody was on any of these boards that we're talking about. But I know the studies were done. I'd ask you to look at People for Bikes and take a look at their website and the studies and surveys that they're doing. And not go by individuals, just go by what's really happening with connectivity. And what is the purpose of this? And the bigger picture for the next generation and the next generation. And the narrow view is concerning to me because it doesn't really set us for the foundation of what these master plans were designed to do. And I hope we get the grant money this time. I know material costs are going to continue to go on the rise, and I know this is going to be a continued struggle for members of the board and for the next generation of members, but one day this all connect in together. I think the flow is easy. I'm all about taking away elements that don't work. I'm all about experimenting with projects that don't work, and that's what kind of led us here today. We are not really, we strive to be a biking community, and we might publicize it, but if you go around and look at the safety elements that we have for cyclists, we don't do a good job of that in Siloam Springs, and that's just the fact. Having said that, I also wear flip-flops when I ride a bicycle. I don't wear a helmet. I got scolded by board members before, but I'm kind of like a guy that rides a motorcycle. Some people wear a helmet, some people don't. But when I ride, I wear the safety equipment. And so there's just a bunch of different ways to look at how cyclists use the trails. Some people use e-bikes, which is becoming an issue in some cities. Because are e-bikes really bicycles? Or are they a motorized vehicle?
Bicycles.
Can they be used on trail systems? So there's a lot of stuff going on. It's ever evolving, but I appreciate you guys asking questions, and it's all legitimate. But I'm a real big believer in this, and I hope we get the grants this time on time, because costs are going to continue to inflate. Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes, Carol?
I know that we've talked about this probably too much, but I am a little bit familiar with the biking community, maybe not so much in Siloam, but in Northwest Arkansas. And biking is becoming very popular. There are certain businesses, certain leaders in Northwest Arkansas that are encouraging the biking. My daughter has a biking business, which is e-bike rentals. So I don't have the statistics. She does. She belongs to a woman's biking group in Northwest Arkansas. She promotes it. They bike on trails, but they also bike on bike paths. And it's becoming more and more influential in Northwest Arkansas. We're becoming known as being the biking center of the United States. Whether we want to know that or whether we want it to happen or not, it's happening. So I think the 10-foot bike paths are important. I think the grant is important. If you look at how much money is involved on our part versus how much is being spent by the grant, I think it's well worth that we apply for the grants.
Thank you, Carol.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Reed.
Justin, I know you've been up there for a bit. I do appreciate the work that you all have done with this. Thank you. I will say that I like the idea of a side path. And one of the things that strikes me the most is something that I probably may never do the rest of my life, but people with strollers, that soft voice that may not be here tonight alongside the pedestrians and the bicyclers. But for someone to be able to take a stroller with a child and to go down the side of a road and feel safe, that means a lot to me, and especially with connectivity. I know Director Burns speaks of connectivity a lot with more with exercise, but with someone to be able to go to the store, get some groceries, and come back home with a sense of safety and well-being, that means a lot to me, as well as getting to schools and back home. I think there's a tremendous need for that, so I really support the side path.
Thank you, Reed. So we are considering the permission to apply for the grant. That's all you will be approving tonight is the application for the grant. So if there is no other discussion, I would ask for a motion to approve item F which would be for the grant application for Progress Avenue Sidepath. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Hunt,
Yes.
Bristler,
Yes.
Allen,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Sappington,
Yes.
Smiley,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes.
Motion is approved. Next, we have item G, and I believe that we have had that discussion for both of these, so I will ask for a motion to approve item G, which is the grant application for West Harvard Street Sidepath.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Bristler,
Yes.
Allen,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Sappington,
Yes.
Smiley,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes.
Hunt,
Yes.
Motion is approved. Thank you. Next, we will move to our regularly scheduled items, ordinances, and the first is Ordinance 22-12. This will be the second reading, amending Section 102-21 of the City Municipal Code, rezoning from I-1 to R2 and C2, 2600 block of North Country Club Road and the 1900 block of Brashears Road. Ben?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the board, Ben Rhodes, Senior Planner. This is the second reading for the rezoning. This is going from the I-1 to R2 and also C2 for the one lot that's on the corner. Staff is still recommending approval, and we are available for any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address Ordinance 22-12? If you will give us your name and address, please, and you will have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Sue Ellen Coleman, 13995 Inverness Lane. And I'm one of the owners of this project, and I would request that you read 2 and 3 together tonight if possible.
Thank you, Sue Ellen. Anyone else? If not, directors, comments, questions? There being none, do I have a motion to place Ordinance 22-12 on its second reading?
Madam Mayor, I do not have an issue with going ahead and placing on its second and third reading tonight.
So we
If
do have a
board
motion to place
agrees.
Ordinance 22-12 on its second and third reading.
Second.
We will suspend the rules and reading title only. We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Allen,
Yes.
Carroll,
Yes.
Sappington,
Yes.
Smiley,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes.
Hunt,
Yes.
Bristler.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Philip?
Ordinance number 22-12, an ordinance amending section 102-21 of the Siloam Springs Municipal Code, City Zoning Map, rezoning from I-1 to R2 and C2, property located in the 2600 block of North Country Road and the 1900 block of Brashears Road.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to
Yes.
make a motion, we adopt ordinance 22-12.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt. Roll call.
Carroll,
Yes.
Sappington,
Yes.
Smiley,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes.
Hunt,
Yes.
Bristler,
Yes.
Allen.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Ordinance 22-12 is adopted. The next item is Ordinance 22-13, first reading, amending City Code Section 66-90, noise. Captain Miller?
Madam Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of the board, Captain Scott Miller, Siloam Springs Police Department. The Board of Directors requested staff complete a review of the current city noise ordinance. After consulting with the city attorney, staff identified areas of the existing code which required redactions and amendments. The current noise ordinance falls under Chapter 66, Article 4 of the Siloam Springs Nuisance and Abatement Code. Excuse me. Staff also appends that the current ordinance is constitutionally valid. However, we did identify some recommended removal of dated and obsolete terminology. Some of the most notable changes were the removal of the wording unreasonable, as the courts have determined that unreasonable was too vague. The updated language to include any sound repercussion equipment that is plainly audible within a distance of 75 feet or greater between the hours of 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. Also changes to the daytime hours, which an individual that may be disturbed will no longer have to file an affidavit requiring an arrest warrant, but to only file a police offense report with the police department, as well as providing greater clarity on the procedures for obtaining permits. Staff will be available for any questions.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the audience that has a comment or question on Ordinance 22-13? Yes, ma'am. If you'll state your name and address.
Yes, my name is Alma Sanchez. I own the Park House Kitchen and Bar. I reside at 408 Greenwood Place in Siloam Springs. This was brought to my attention earlier last week that there would even be a reading or anything about this. And when I had a few questions, it was brought to my attention that we would, as a pre-existing business, and my business model includes live music, and we have that several nights a week. It typically doesn't go past 10:30, but there are the occasions that I might have music that goes later than that. Once a month, we host like a late night karaoke night where it might be louder. But there was mention of a special use permit that we could apply for. I just wanted some more guidance on what that was going to look like, if that was something that I could fill out and it would roll for the whole season, so to speak, or do I have to fill out an application every week asking for permission for a special use permit that following Saturday or whatever. And that's just my business. There's a lot of other things that this might affect us, like construction and construction crews trying to start to do stuff. A lot of them start their projects before 8 a.m. as well, with the city making noise. Sometimes they're out there mowing before. It's usually not in a residential area. So I want to know what the distinguished zones are going to look like, if it'll apply differently for commercial or downtown. We're not an entertainment district, but we are a downtown space. So if there would be separate guidance for commercial use versus your neighbor playing the music too loud.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don, would you like to address those questions?
Don Clark, Community Development Director. I can address the permitting side of it. So it would be a noise permit is what we would institute should the ordinance pass. And that noise permit would have to be applied for. You would have to explain what it is you're doing, the location of what you're doing, and the hours you're planning on operating for that permit, and it would be put under consideration at that point in time. So I just wanted to answer as it related to the permit. It wouldn't be a special use. It would actually be a noise permit.
So, and I will ask, because that was part of her question, was would that be something that she would have to apply for each time she was having an event that would?
Typically today, the way we do special event permits and things of that nature, it would be each individual time that you're planning to operate outside those hours instead of kind of a rolling permit. So we make sure that we have the proper information, and that information would then be sent to the police department so they notice and know who has the noise permit in subsequent weekends or days or whatever. Yes.
Thank you very much. Philip?
Don, there wouldn't be, if this goes through, there wouldn't be anything that if Ms. Sanchez came in and said, you know, let's say the fourth Friday night of every month, that they have this event that if they become that specific, they could apply for that as one permit, correct?
Yes, we would take that under consideration, absolutely.
Thank you. Yes, Captain Miller.
Captain Miller, Police Department. So in the proposed ordinance that you have, it specifically addressed the commercially zoned areas on Friday and Saturday nights and extends it to 11 p.m. And I hope that helps her, because she even said it only goes to about 10. So that was the feedback that we had gotten, is typically most of that stuff ended by 10 or thereafter, but we went ahead and extended it to 11 in the proposed ordinance that you have before you.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, David.
Ms. Sanchez, can I ask you a question? Do you,
If you come to the
Yeah.
podium, please,
you'll have
Alma.
to come back up. You said the Park House?
Yes.
Have you had any complaints of the music?
In 3.5 years, I've had two complaints, and then we turned it down, and then they never came back.
Is it residents in the area or just?
I'm
in
not
general?
sure. They don't
Yeah.
tell me who specifically is doing it. I think it's somebody that lives close to downtown on a hill, right above.
And then the only other question I just wanted to know, who is the best karaoke player in Siloam Springs?
Sydney
probably
Reese.
Brad Burns singing.
Sydney Reese.
Thank you, Alma.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I have
Yes.
a question, and it
Okay.
does involve the Park House.
All right,
Uh,
if you come back up.
because I enjoy the outdoor venue,
Yes.
and I've heard the music,
Thank you.
and it's something I enjoy. But I do know that this has been during a weekday. I think there was something going on at the community building, and I could hear the music that was playing. I think you had a bike night, maybe?
Tuesday nights, we typically will, we do a bike night that runs from 6 to 9, and they're playing right now, and we can't hear them.
So I just wondered how that would affect business, because I don't find it obtrusive, and I don't know what is loud for other people, but I could hear the music from Park House to the community building. Not inside, but outside.
If the way it would work, Ms. Sanchez would just apply for the noise permit for that night with the other nights listed, and then they would have a permit to do that. So if we got complaints, we would say it's a permitted event, and they have a permit until 9:30, whatever Ms. Sanchez listed on that permit. Outside of that, the way this ordinance is drafted, if I understand it correctly, is that if I'm the noise maker and I don't have a permit, and it is annoying and disturbing others, then that individual can, call the police and the police can come and ask me to turn it down. If I don't, then I could, I assume as the reporting party, I could file a written report, file a complaint, and then the police could take it from there. But the way it is today, the problem that we have is if I am making a lot of noise and somebody complains, they have to fill out an affidavit to deal with it, and that's one of the problems that we ran into when we were asked to go back and look at this noise ordinance. It's a difficult thing, and if you look in this noise ordinance, we ran into an issue for after 10 o'clock. And it becomes very difficult to say, we can't make any noise after 10 o'clock. You got to be able to make some noise. So there's got to be some measurement. We talked before, when we brought this before you and presented it back in September, we can't use decibel meters because there's too much background noise. So Jay and the police department and staff did some research, and what we found, I think, and Jay maybe can speak to this or at least back me up, that the noise ordinances that have held up in cases have some measurable standard. And in this case, what we did is to say after hours, after 10 o'clock, if you don't have a permit, if you create noise, such as playing a radio or a musical instrument or a Bluetooth speaker or whatever it is, and that noise is plainly audible 75 feet out, then you're in violation. So I can play my music on my back porch at midnight, and my neighbor might be able to hear it, but if it's within 50 feet, I'm generally going to be okay. If my neighbor complains, chances are police come and ask me to turn it down. But there's got to be some measurable standard. We talked about 50 feet. Anything less than that gets a little tight because 50 feet's not that far. 75 feet's 1/4 of a football field, right? We talked about 150 feet and thought that was maybe too far. But it's this struggle of trying to find where that balance is. I think we're close. We're where we think we are. I think if we adopt it and we find problems, we can always come back and amend it, as happens with trying to implement new ordinances, trying to make sure we don't create the unintended consequence, but there's never a guarantee that we're not going to create an unintended consequence. So We were asked to deal with it based on some comments earlier back in September. I know it's late. We kind of dropped the ball on it due to some other issues that came up. But this is where we are today, trying to at least update our noise ordinance. That's something that can be enforceable, something that can be supported in the courts if we ever had to write a citation.
Madam Mayor.
Philip? Yes.
So I have a question about item C, number 2, playing of radios, instruments, and other instruments or devices. And you just mentioned something about that particular item. And I've had some conversations with staff. And if you would like to sit down.
I have one more thing I wanted to add.
I didn't want you to just have to stand there forever.
No, one thing was I have no problem with having the ordinance or needing to fill out a permit. I just wanted to think about the ease of it, so it's not, for one, it's gonna be a lot more paperwork for you guys. And then the turnaround time, sometimes I apply for a special use permit and it's taken 6 weeks to get it all applied through all the proper channels. So that's one thing to take into consideration as a business when we are trying to do that. If we could consider the verbiage of making it recurring or expedite that. I know there's no charge or fee for applying for it, but just the processes that you go through.
Just it's a special event permit, not a special use. So
yes.
Terminology
So that's what I meant.
but
Special event permit is what has taken me a while to.
Generally speaking, you have to apply 14 days in advance to give us time. But I also think, as we discussed earlier, in your case, if, at the beginning of the season, if you can, and you may not have every one of them penciled in, but if you can pencil all those in
Yeah,
first,
and that's all I need
right?
to, yeah.
And then, there may be some that come in that you have to just plan for, but I don't think that we should require you to do a separate application for every single event. If you can list all those events and be very clear with staff, I think we could be able to do one application and one permit to cover that.
Okay.
And then something special comes along, you may have to, apply for another one. But I think we can work with that one, yes.
And I can respect that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, and because of some of the things that you did bring up, and you can go because of some of the things that you brought up, and because of some of the concerns that I have, and as a result of discussion I've had with some staff, especially in relation to the playing of radios, instruments, and other instruments or devices, I have had some citizens that live in the park area express concerns to me about the volume of the devices that are used by some of the kids that are playing basketball and skating and playing volleyball down there. And I first want to say the citizens and I are happy that the kids are using the park. We are so happy that they are using the park. That's what it's there for. Sometimes the music that they play is not only very loud, but not really family appropriate lyrics. And so just down from where they're playing the music is a pavilion where people like to maybe have birthday parties or they like to have family reunions. And then down a little bit further from that is a playground. I would like there to be a little bit something that specifically states in parks that however many feet away, no matter what time of day it is, we should protect the families from loud, vulgar music and the neighbors in the area, and not expect for them to have to call the police. If this is a public park, then we want it to be a place where the kids are going to go and they can play their music, just not so loud that the other people in the park can't enjoy it. So it may be that it would be good to take some of the things that have been brought up into consideration and come back with a different proposal.
This is only the first reading.
Right, this is only the first reading. We could amend something, or maybe there are some things that you might want to present differently. I'm not sure. I'll leave that up to you.
Madam Mayor.
Just a minute. Carol was not finished,
I'm
so
sorry, Carol.
I am going to give her the floor.
Some of that was answered because all I wanted to state was this is a business owner trying to do the right thing for her business. And I don't want it to make it so cumbersome that it hampers her business, because we all want businesses to succeed.
And I agree with that, and that's part of what maybe.
So that's
could be
why I
part of-
said a lot of those questions were answered when you were talking. So go ahead.
So, Philip, yes.
So, to be clear on what Director Hunt is referring to, she brought an issue up yesterday to me, and we kind of debated on what's the best way to do it, and I think there's two options. One would be for staff to pull it and go back to the drawing board and add a provision for parks, or Director Hunt, the other option, based on Director Allen's comment, you could move to have the first reading, subject to staff amending the ordinance prior to the second reading and putting a provision in there for parks. Generally, what we were thinking, based on Director Hunt's comments to me yesterday, is to, as I talked about the after hours, the 75 feet after hours, after 10 p.m., is to apply that to parks when parks are open. So meaning that I could go into a park, I could be at the pavilion, I could be having a family reunion there, and I could play my music, but I couldn't play it at a volume that would be plainly audible 75 feet away to disturb another family having another family reunion or something along those lines. We might, you might have some discussions if that's what the board wishes to do about whether it's 75 feet or 150 feet or 25 feet. I don't know. I think, again, the tighter you make it, the more problem it is, because we're going to make noise. But the idea, I think, that Director Hunt brought up to me yesterday, based on some complaints that we had and had some previous discussions on, there is some park activity that is creating an awful loud playing of jukebox and Bluetooth speakers, and it's not likely addressed in here unless somebody formally complains to the police. And if we do that in the park, where it should be probably a quieter, more serene setting, it made sense to me. I just wasn't really sure if it was the appropriate way for staff to pull it and say we're not ready, which I didn't want to do because we were already sort of late bringing this forward, or Director Hunt suggesting that it be pulled and send it back to staff, or again have first reading, but have first reading subject to staff bringing back an amended version that deals with parks, which would be another option. Excuse me, based on what Director Allen said.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, the other thing, what you were referring to, Philip, is we could read the first reading, and then if Director Hunt wants to work with staff to come up with something, and because I'm fully supportive of profane music should not be heard by a birthday party for 5-year-olds, but work to have an amendment that we amend in the next meeting for the second reading.
We would just bring back an amended version that for second reading. I would say it probably won't specifically address the verbiage because freedom of expression, but the noise level, right? So, yeah.
Well, I would suggest that you actually have staff go look at the pavilion that Mindy's talking about and say, from this pavilion down to where the music is, what, Mindy, what'd you say? It's the basketball courts mainly?
We actually measured it during our discussion, and it is over 100
yeah,
feet.
Okay. The 75-foot rule, I think, would apply very well in parks.
That's what I was wondering, is if you had the music at the basketball court playing and then go down the pavilion and just say, okay, I can hear it now. No, I can't hear it now, or something.
From the middle of the space between the basketball court and the skate park.
Yeah.
It's 200 feet running east to the west end of the parking space, of the parking lot. So it's much further to the pavilion, plus the walls of the pavilion give you a sound buffer too. Yeah. But Director Hunt or Director Allen, if you want to make that motion, we'll be happy to do that and bring it back.
I just don't want us to delay it tonight by putting it to a whole new, like pulling it, you said. So
we're perfectly happy with that, yes.
Thank you. Lisa, I think, is wanting the floor. She asked a while ago. So,
yeah,
Lisa.
I have two questions. So, the first one, Ms. Sanchez, does that cover your questions? I mean, are you happy with that if we said you do not have to complete a permit every time?
Yeah.
Okay. And Captain Miller, we don't really have a lot of business complaints, do we? I think it's a majority of, the reason I'd like to see this pushed through is because, like Philip said, we've had some issues that I've sent in Philip's office and with Captain and the chief, that they keep calling me. When is this going to be taken care of? Because I need something fixed here. And it's hard on them, and so we need to get something for those citizens. I don't think we get a lot of complaints about businesses. I don't think they're really.
Not currently, no. We've only gotten a few from the Park House. But years ago, there was one other establishment that we got quite a few complaints on, but it is no longer in business. And as far as the parks go, as of recently, especially with the obscene music, just directing the officers to deal with that as a separate issue than noise because of disorderly conduct. So we're kind of constitutionality, First Amendment. They can play their music, but when it goes to the vulgar type lyrics, then we have a disorderly conduct, which is completely different and doesn't fall under the ordinance. It's actually a criminal act that we can take without a complaint.
Oh, so we can, it's already being addressed.
As we see it, it's a little bit harder when an individual calls and then we drive through and they no longer play the lyrics. We don't have that option other than to file the formal complaint through us as a citizen.
Okay.
So.
Okay. And I think 2 calls in 3 years, that's phenomenal. I mean, that's.
We were having a music festival that week, if that makes it any, like,
So.
it wasn't a normal thing.
Yeah, and it wasn't, okay.
Anyone else?
Try again,
Brad?
Madam Mayor. Am I ready?
Well, I think Brad
So the gentleman on Washington Street tried to compare his noise to the decimals of the train going by. You would love that one. You weren't on the board. That was entertaining. That's what he was trying to do. What I appreciate about Park House is they actually set up a venue that directs the noise back into the building specifically, and they address some stuff on their own. So I appreciate us working with them. The struggle you're going to have at the park is that it's the same struggle that we had getting the skate park in, is that it was something new, it was an outlet for these folks. Unfortunately, apparently the parents don't understand to teach common sense, so now we're going to put that burden on the police department. In essence, that's what this ordinance is going to do. Luckily, they're experts now in these very compassionate compliance techniques that they have. They spend an exorbitant amount of time addressing issues instead of arresting people, and they're trying to be that police department that some people expect them to be. And so when it comes to that music, I would just encourage it. I don't think you can have it in an ordinance, but some real courteous things might be, having the speakers pointed away from the pavilion. There's some common sense things, but I don't want to strip that outlet because it can be misconstrued either way. So I think no matter what we pass, I believe there's going to be an educational period there. I know PD is going to be lenient on that, but we need to understand that you may still get a call no matter what we do by the 3rd reading. It's going to take time for them to implement that because the youth of America are interesting, and they'll do exactly what Captain Miller said. They'll get the vibe, they'll make it go away, there'll be a game, and there's going to be a game being played down there. And we just don't want to get misconstrued. We want it to be an outlet. We want that entertainment there. But unfortunately, we're almost adopting a policy of just common courtesy and respect. And that's what this ordinance comes down to. And it's sad that we have to do that, but it is the right thing to do. And I trust that the police department will do the right thing, whatever our 3rd reading is. But there is going to be a curve there, and I do believe that the folks using that facility will understand what they're trying to accomplish, and they will show some courtesy and common respect to that. I would also encourage, if somebody's using that pavilion, if an adult would, I'm not going to use that, if an adult would just go down and ask. You don't have to call city resources every time. Sometimes just going down and having an adult male with his hair pulled back and wearing a wife beater shirt with some tattoos might help young people go on the path of life correctly. So I hope we make your folks happy, but there's going to be a learning curve, and that's another thing I appreciate about PD. They're going above and beyond with our citizens, not forcefully enforcing, but encouraging folks on certain ordinances. So I appreciate that.
Madam Mayor.
Mindy?
I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying. There will be a curve. I will say that some of those that have expressed concerns, some of the nicest people around, and have actually approached these kids, but these people are also, like we are, interested in them having an outlet, just possibly not playing music so loud that it can be heard so far away, and words being inappropriate for young families. So I would like to move that we place ordinance number 2213 on its second reading, subject to
First reading.
First reading. First reading. I'm already getting ahead. Subject to amending section C2 to include something that specifies public parks.
May I offer a suggestion?
Please offer a suggestion.
Eliminate the C2 and just say amending to include a provision specifically for parks, because it may not be appropriate in C2.
Okay.
But
Judy, did you
Philip,
get that?
you would actually bring that back to us later with that
Yes.
language?
Second reading.
Yes.
If we can get it resolved, and we got an extra week between the board meetings, so we should be able to get it drafted and get it in.
So the ordinance is, or the motion is to place ordinance 22-13 on its first reading, suspending the rules and reading title only, subject to amending the ordinance to include
Provision for parks.
a
Provision for
provision
parks.
for parks.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Sappington,
Yes.
Smiley,
Yes.
Burns,
Yes.
Hunt,
Yes.
Rissler,
Yes.
Allen,
Yes.
Carroll.
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Ordinance.
Next, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Philip. Thank you.
Ordinance number 22-13, an ordinance amending section 66-90 of the Siloam Springs Municipal Code with respect to prohibited noise.
Thank you. Next will be our staff reports. It looks like tonight it's our administrator's report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a number of expenditures to report and a few other items of interest. We purchased 2,000 gallons of unleaded gasoline and 6,000 gallons of off-road diesel for inventory for all city vehicles. This is not something that we would normally report, because usually we don't spend greater than $30,000 to buy that, but due to the price of gas today, that purchase amount was $31,241.20, which now has to be reported to the board. At the airport, we spent $36,000 on 8,000 gallons of jet fuel. In the police department, we purchased a AWINS radio antenna for communication within the high school. After we did the AWINS project, we found that there were areas within the high school that we still could not communicate within the AWINS project. So we spent $32,740.50 on that, and the school district is agreeing to reimburse the city for half of that cost. And then in the IT department, we are upgrading some building security equipment, and we spent $47,271.75. All, of course, are budgeted items and within the budget. And then, based on inventory within the utilities, we are still purchasing future electric transformers, 37.5 kVA single-phase pad-mounted transformers for inventory for $95,550, for $99,120, 2850 kVA single-phase pad-mounted transformers for inventory. And then for $96,000, 30,000 feet of 4/0 primary wire for inventory. And again, those transformers are slotted to be starting construction in likely late 2023. For April sales tax, the city is up 15.7% for the month and up 15.6% for the year. The county sales tax, our portion was up 11.5% for the month and up 4.4% for the year. So it's still ahead, but not as great year to date for the county. The last thing I have to report is back to electrical transformers. So we had an order of electrical transformers that were due to be delivered, I believe, this month. We got word that they're not going to start constructing those transformers until August. We have another order of transformers that are due to be delivered in June. Because of what recently occurred, we thought it would be appropriate to start looking down into the planning stage of wondering what will happen if we don't get the order in June. So we don't know for sure, but if the June delivery date is postponed like the May delivery date has been postponed, we're likely to have a shortage of transformers for all the residential projects that have been approved. So staff is working to identify all of the projects, commercial and residential. Commercial doesn't seem to be a problem today because we have sufficient inventory to meet all the commercial demands. But on the residential side, we may have to limit the transformers that we can provide to the developments that have been approved. And so we're trying to go through that list to look at what the priority is based on the approval date and then what the status of that project is. Some projects may have earlier approval date, but the developer hasn't put any money into the ground. Some projects, the developer's already got a later approval date, but they've put money into the ground. We believe we can likely meet some of the requirements for almost every one of those that have recently been approved, but we might not be able to have transformers for 100% of that project. So for a project that might have had, let's just say, 25 single-family lots, we might have enough, if what happens in May happens in June, we may be able only to supply them with 2 transformers and tell them they could go to final plat with 8 lots. And since it's our doing, not the developer's doing, I wanted to let you know that we may have to see phasing that's outside of the normal approval process of coming to the board. I don't think it would be appropriate to make the developer to come back to the board for a updated phasing plan because of a shortage. But we had plans to be able to meet all of these. We had the orders. We have fairly decent inventory. But if we're not able to get the ones due to the supply chain that we have on order that were scheduled to be delivered, it's going to create a crunch. We're not the only ones having that problem. We've had some discussions with other electric providers, and they are telling developers that you can't build houses on all the lots. We can only service a certain percentage or certain number of those lots or lots within a certain area of that subdivision. So this isn't unique to Siloam Springs, but I wanted to give you a heads up on it. It's not something that I wished I didn't have to report. But the other thing that it does, we will be telling, if it's a residential subdivision that's coming in, and staff has already begun telling folks who wanted to submit a preliminary plat that they have the right to submit a preliminary plat, but under the rules, we have to be able to say that we have adequate infrastructure to be able to support that. And we're not 100% sure that we're going to be able to say that today until we get those orders in and we start seeing that. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that. But it is something that we're watching very intently, and hopefully it doesn't happen, but I wanted to give you a heads up in case it does. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Philip. So at this time, we will move to the director's reports. Tonight, Director Allen, we will start with you, and Mindy, Director Hunt, we will end with you. So, Director Allen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to give appreciation to Ms. Sanchez for coming tonight and giving us your input on the noise ordinance. That was helpful, and I appreciate you being here. Brad, I had a question. You were talking about the side path going through the cemetery and by your house. How wide is that? Do you know? Is that a 10-foot or 6 foot or 8 foot? Is it really? It just doesn't look it, and so I didn't know. I didn't know if that was before the 10-foot requirement, so I had no idea.
Grant also, right?
And then when we did that back in '95, we were answering what the bicyclists demanded, and you know, tastes are always changing. I think everybody who knows him will agree that Leo Sedian is probably the most historical biker alive today in Siloam Springs, and knows probably more about biking than everyone in this room together. He has used bicycling as his mode of transportation all the way back to when I was a kid, and in fact, that was one of the people we referenced when we put in Dogwood with the bike lane, because of his route that he always used to go home. And you know, Brad, you mentioned the Scuttlebutt. Mark had only been the administrator for a year, and Dogwood had been planned to be widened for many years because of the amount of people coming from the north that come into JBU and to our schools. And it was very much needed to widen Dogwood, and it was thought if we widen and put a bike lane, it will maybe lead to further bike lanes, but it did not. Anyway, I don't have anything else. I just wanted to say thanks for going over so many things. I jokingly said before the meeting, I said, oh, it looks like it's going to be a quick one, and then I realized I probably jinxed us because we had a lot of stuff to talk about, and I thought we got a lot accomplished tonight. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. Carol?
Well, I do appreciate all the conversation that we have. I think that it's extremely good for the board to have this type of discussion. I want to remind everyone that there is a comprehensive plan review meeting on Thursday at the library, May 19th from 6 to 8, and we sure would like to have your input. As I was looking at the city website, there are still a lot of job opportunities through the city. So if you're looking for something, please look at our website. I did enjoy the East Main Street review at the library. I think we got some good input. So most of the people that I talked to were really not in favor of the roundabout. And that was the one main thing that I got out of this discussion. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Reed?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know we're finishing up a year of school. JBU has graduated and dispersed. The high school is going to graduate here soon. Memorial Day is coming up. I think we have much to look forward to. I'm going to say a quiet summer, but maybe others have different plans, but hopefully it will fall within Mindy's requirements. But it's good to see that summer's on its way, and we can take that moment to take that breath and just relax. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa?
At our last board goals meeting, Director Allen brought up the idea of having committees for any community art and or the music for the amphitheater. After having time to talk to citizens and with the feedback I've received, I would like to see if there's any way we can have citizens participate more in that decision-making process. I've had a lot of citizens say, yeah, I wish we could, you know, even if it's something online that they can give input. But I like the idea of a committee. It makes it well-rounded. I know we've all said this, and I'm going to reiterate it. This last storm, I got a lot of calls, but we need to focus on drainage issues. We're not having 100-year floods. We're not having 10-year floods. We're having every year floods. And our drainage just can't handle it. And so I really, as we talk about things, we really need to make this a major focus. The June Community Foundation Prayer is June 4th at 9 a.m. at the Chamber of Commerce. Then I wanted to say thank you to the VFW Post 1674 for recently placing American flags at the resting place of many veterans from our area. They placed flags at multiple cemeteries, and I want to say thank you to them for remembering those that gave it all. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Marla?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have several little notes, so bear with me as I go from one page to the other. I want to start off with saying that the baton and the job to get this done was given to me the other night by one of Director Burns's friends. This up by the Main Street Academy and by Palfy, the crosswalk traffic and everything in there is quite dangerous, and most of the kids there do walk. So if East Main Street project is put forth, I think it should start on that end. But then let's jump to East Main. Oh boy, thank you staff for putting up with me. I had lots of questions. My parents have owned land on that road since 1960, so I've seen it through all the stages. And I went through and I walked through and visited with some of the shop owners, and their concerns are some of the improvements aren't the kind that will enable them to keep their large semis and everything coming in. The bump outs and stuff, they want everybody to know that that's an industrial area. It's not downtown. The beautification, trees, bushes, shrubs, whatever, flowers, is not going to help them any. What's going to help them is that if the bump outs are ones you can drive over, turn semis over, and I think staff was aware of their needs and were willing to accommodate that. I also talked to several people, said that that is just way too much money for the board to decide to spend, that it should be put to a citizen's vote. And also, I heard the traffic circle was, well, we'll just say it wasn't needed. And let's see, I think that it was very important that we listened to the business owners, and I was there early at the meetings, the business owner meeting, and I asked staff, I said, I want to know the opinion of the business owners in relationship to the citizens, so we can know, what they think and what the citizens, and they were kind enough to collect that information for me. Before, when we had the meeting, it was just everybody put their dot where they wanted to, and we didn't know if they were citizens or business owners or out of town or, whatever, but they were able to keep this separate, and we were able to see some of the opinions of the business owners. And moving right along, I too want to thank Captain Miller for working on the noise ordinance. It's going to be really difficult for you to enforce if we have to put the language in it. I think us having the opportunity to just let you deal with language on your own, and I do agree with Director Burns, it doesn't hurt to go down there and ask them, or let them know that your family's down there having a picnic. We're going to be down there for 30 more minutes. Could you kind of keep it down a little bit till we finish our picnic? And it's true, some of the children aren't taught the values and stuff that
we were taught when we were little, and the respect for other individuals. And sometimes we have to step up to the plate and do that and be an example. So I think it's, I don't want to create a lot of extra work for the PD, but we want everybody to live comfortably in Siloam. And I'm going to finish with the transformers. You know, God has a sense of humor, and God can take control every now and then. And when he pulls the plug on something and you can't find it or buy it or it's not ready, you know, he's slowing down a little bit to let us catch up where we've been running. And I truly believe that.
Thank you, Marla. Brad?
I wanted to say something, but that's the old fireman in me, and I'm not going to say it. The Main Street event is at Park House Friday, and that's their fundraiser. So if you get an opportunity, it's always fun to attend those sort of things. If we recall, I mentioned last year in November, I went to Bentonville. IRWP hosted a low-impact development conference. It was a 2-dayer, and I came back and mentioned that, and I'm going to mention it one more time because I'm an honest believer as we grow and develop, if we don't adopt these policies, we are going to continue to experience what we just experienced recently. And it's going to be more than once a year. It's going to be frequently, and I could spend time running through the numbers of what our population is going to be like in the near future, and we all live downstream. I do believe it's time to get rid of the retention ponds and go to detention ponds. I think we need to go to GPS gating systems on some of these. I think we need to dig them out. They obviously are too shallow, they're inadequate, and I believe that some of our engineers, maybe not with the city, but some folks that we're using are using an antiquated method that is not the best need for Siloam Springs. So please, low impact development practices, it's going across the nation, and I think we have a responsibility. We're not behind the 8 ball, but I think everybody is starting to realize the importance of these practices, and so here we are. And I hope looking out to the future that we can do that. And if we don't, I'm going to take my 3 minutes up on that podium and use stronger language that I can't use here. So that'll be fun. That'll be fun in the future, especially for Philip. Won't you enjoy that? So along with that, this is just something I do. I honestly want to find solutions in Siloam, and I don't want to get caught in social media and complaining and all that. So Friday, I went to another conference at the Exchange in Bentonville because it's held in Bentonville, but other cities are attending. And this one, if you want to look this one up, if you'll look up missingmiddlehousing.com, and it's just good information on addressing some of our duplex issue and parking issues. And it goes back to some of the stuff we were doing in the 50s and 60s when we talk about cottages and triplexes that look like residential homes. And I just, I'm struggling because I receive, you know, it's not complaints. We just have conversations with folks with the 55 plus wanting to live in the historical district, talking about doing developments in the east part of town with some of that connectivity to Lowe's and Walmart, some of the restaurants and things like that. And I'm tired of hearing about these duplexes and our suburban sprawl going on. So we need to start looking. I would encourage us to look at urbanism. And urbanism comes back to the inside of that, and we require a certain standard of building. I know the price point's a question, but I just think it's time for us as a city to stop, drop, and roll and just reevaluate and put requirements on people and start thinking outside the box, working with developers, looking at our zoning and density maps in certain areas, and if a developer has an idea that does not fit in our present codes, and I know we struggle with form-based codes, you know I'm a fan of them, But it's just, I think we're behind the 8 ball. Here's 3 examples. 1/3 of the housing is single person. By 2025, 75 to 80% of the housing will have no children. And by 2030, 1 in 5 Americans will be 65 plus. We're going to be at 1.6 million in Northwest Arkansas. We can't continue to think and develop in the way we're doing that. I love my neighborhood, but there's potential for other people to also enjoy my neighborhood and not devalue other people's properties. And I just encourage us to do that. And if you get a chance, staff and fellow board members, take a look at that and just gleam through the information. I appreciate it. Lastly, I want to go on record. I love roundabouts so much that I will drive 30 minutes out of my way to experience the pleasure of a roundabout. But along with roundabouts, I also believe in the process. And I appreciate the folks that show up. And my emotions and my pleasure of roundabouts are not hurt if we don't get a roundabout. I don't influence anybody. I just encourage them to show up. And whatever we process out of East Main through this process, I think it's great. Same way the comprehensive plan. I'm not hurt either way. But I just want to be clear.
Okay.
I'm a huge fan of roundabouts. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I've got one thing before Mindy, if possible. I had to recognize some students.
All right. So, Mindy, would you like to go ahead and make your comments now, or would you, okay, defer to Director Allen to do that before? Okay. David?
Can I go? Siloam Springs High School Art Department was announcing that 4 of their works from the school art department was recognized at the Governor's Mansion Juried Exhibit. It was a statewide competition. The works were honored at a reception on May 7th by Governor Hutchinson, and those 4 students were Lorena Arribas, Crystal Mercado, Elliot Posey, and Aaliyah Roby. And Lorena Arribas won the best ceramic with the Crow Gluggle Jug. So I had said I would recognize those students, so thank you.
Thank you, David. Mindy?
Congratulations to those students. Thank you for coming to express your concerns. Thank you for working on the noise ordinance. Thank you to the city staff for gathering people again to get feedback on East Main Street. And with that, I move that we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Yeah,